So guys, just before the final presentation, I want to say thanks to everybody for coming in these Corona times and sharing us your time. We will keep on doing events in the near future. We know it's been a long time and everything was closed and we couldn't make corporate events, but hopefully in the upcoming months, and hopefully even every month, we'll be able to do an event. So stay tuned. We're going to have lots of interesting stuff coming up that we are currently doing in the Israeli chapter. And hopefully we'll see you again. Thank you. I'll give the lead now to Meiran.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, this is fine. All right, nice to meet you all. It's my great honor to be here, and thank you, Oz, for inviting me. It was a kind of a last-minute notice, so it's going to be kind of an open discussion. I'm going to speak on something that it's not going to be that technical like I guess you usually do, but I do going to speak about compliance today, and I will try to show how compliance and technical controls that actually can take some part while my developers and security team is working. So maybe I will start with a short introduction. My name is Meiran Galis. I'm the CEO of Saitel AI. What we do is we build a compliance automation platform and management platform. And basically our mission is to put compliance on scale for fast-moving SaaS companies. So we are very focused on cloud-native companies that many times want to sell, want to grow fast, and then they get into the burden of compliance. Usually they're very focused on the product development and on the sales. And then they come into us and we try to help them passing SOC 2, ISO 27001, and some other certifications. So my knowledge came from EY. I was a manager at EY Israel. I led lots of compliance projects in different companies throughout Israel and the United States. I show how fast companies can grow, like Monday, Cyberis, and Checkpoint, Hexagon, like different type of companies. And I get some nice insight I see that you can maybe implement in your own companies. First, what is compliance? So basically, compliance, it's about governance, risk, and compliance. Usually discussed about how companies managing their internal control system. Many times, people, technical people, doesn't really understand and sometimes even doesn't believe why they actually need compliance. For them, it's just only checking the box, and they understand they need to do this in order to sell, maybe in order to gain some competitive advantage with competition outside, but they don't really believe what is the added value in all of this stuff. So today I'm going to show you the added value as being an auditor on the one side, afterwards as being a compliance officer in different companies, and escorting scaling companies, and what are the key issues I get to see over and over that maybe you can implement in your own environment. I'm going to start with a short introduction about SOC 2. SOC 2 is a certification. It's a report attestation, very focused on the US market. So companies are trying to sell products in the United States, and many times getting into the SOC 2. SOC stands for Service Organization Controls, not Security Operations Center. It's not that technical like Security Operations Center, but on the other hand, we do discuss about security. And not only. So as you can see, security is very broad. It starts with organizational security. It goes on afterwards also to different types of control like penetration tests, monitoring, software development lifecycle, access control, and the risk management. And also discussing about the confidentiality of the data. And confidentiality in a sense, so our company build their data structure, and do they have a segregation between development, staging, and production environment? If developers can actually have anything to touch or can play with customer data on the same environment, it's a different VPC, it's a different account, maybe it's the same account and everything is happening in the same place. So this is what compliance is discussing about. The other type of compliance is about ISO. ISO stands for International Standardization, Organization for Standardization. It's a worldwide global certification. It's mainly common in Europe, in the EU. So companies, many times that's very focused and oriented into the EU market, usually tend to start with ISO. Now, ISO, it's broad. You can have certification for food, for healthcare, and also the ISO 27001. Basically, it's very focused about the security. It can be security, it can be risk management, it can be privacy, and it can be this type of a certification. Most of the companies in the first year, if they tend to sell into the EU market, will go with the ISO 27001. Now, the main difference between ISO 27001 and SOC 2 is starting off with the scoping. ISO is very oriented into a security, building information security management system of the company. It's constructed from 140 controls. That's called the statement of applicability. And you also have something called Annex A, statement of applicability, and also 10 subjects that's related into the company risk management, meeting, and etc. Now, the main difference, it's about the methodology. So ISO methodology is more about looking forward for continuous improvement in our control environment. And SOC 2 on their it's very similar to financial reporting, and it's very in-depth. So every company that will go for SOC 2, I don't know, anyone familiar with this type of certification? So have you ever had, if you technical guys, maybe you have ever had, you received some requests, maybe from your manager, just take screenshots, collect data, export from CFA and send it to me. And so this is about SOC 2. It's trust but verify, and companies will need to collect evidence, actually many evidence. It can be hundreds of evidence. And the auditor might also ask, for example, if you have a pull request which is enforced, a code review which is enforced in every pull request that you are doing. Now, in big companies and small companies, it might be different because startup, usually the CTO tend to write code by himself. Now, no one actually review the code that the CTO is writing. So in compliance perspective, you do have a problem over here because when the auditor will come and see if you may have a fraud risk or human error risk, there is a code that wasn't peer reviewed. Now in big companies, because complexity and multiple teams, also you can find scenarios which is not reviewed. So what auditors will do, he will ask for all the pull requests from all the repositories that happening from over a period of time, and then he will just sample randomly a few 25 pull requests, and then he will ask you, and actually is gonna observe by himself, if everything was in compliance. And in other words, if the pull request, if for each pull request that he chose, actually there was also a code review that performed. And this is just an example. Now, SOC 2 is gonna take you longer if you need. ISO is gonna take shorter a period of time. And it's also more expensive. You do have more type of certification. It's based on your field. If you're doing in the healthcare industry, you might need HIPAA and high trust. If you're doing payments, you might need PCI DSS. If you're working with the US federal government, you might need FedRAMP. So it really depends on, I will say, on the region that you are operating. It depends on the industry that you are operating. And soon it's also going to be depend on the technology that you are operating. So if you have a blockchain-based technology and you're doing cryptocurrency or insurance or anything like that, soon you will get to see more and more regulation, and it's already in development by companies like EY, Deloitte, and some other certification bodies. So that was just an introduction. The main reason companies need compliance, first of all, it's they need to sell. And in order to sell, they experience in a block in which prospective actually asking them to comply with some different type of compliance, like SOC 2. Now they want to sell, they want to close the deal, but it's going to take some time. How much time? It depends. It can take 6 months, 12 months, and you want the deal, you want to start processing data. sometimes even only to find a design partner, he also might demand all of the engagement with him with compliance. Second is competitive advantage, because if you work in an environment and you do have competitors, and these competitors are complying with different certifications and you are not, you might get into struggle while trying to sell your product with the compliance department, with the financial department, or with the security department, which this is part of the sales cycles in companies. So this is where I get to see this. Third, last but not least, is the security standard. It's actually gonna build a very robust security program. It's mainly depend on the management approach over compliance. If it's only check the box, this is how it's gonna feel like. No one's gonna really believe in that, and you're gonna just do this because this is a must in order to enable sales. But in other organizations, the management has the full support for the company, for the CTO, for the R&D team, and they actually put in some effort. And when we seen startup on scale, we have one customer that we started with them. They were 35 employees, and in 9 months they became 500 employees, spread out in 40 countries, and actually merge a company within their internal environment. So if you don't build compliance on scale, it's gonna be very difficult managing all of this process. Your main pains in what we get to see is, first of all, inefficiency. You want things to get smooth, to be automated, to be alert if something is wrong, and not to waste your time into collection, screenshot, and all of this stuff, and focusing on the main thing that you need to do. Second is about cost involved. It can take lots of employees' time, and this is just a waste. And third, it's failed results. Failed results which can have an increased risk within the company environment, or failed result within the SOC 2 report, for example, which you will need to distribute for your own customers. So actually what could happen is that you will send a compliance report in which you pay $10,000 or $20,000, and actually the result of the report is gonna have a failed result. It's gonna have a qualified opinion, or otherwise it's gonna also have a deviation within the report. So all of your customers actually gonna see what is not operating effectively within your company. And this is what you want to reduce or eliminate, at least to the minimum. This is just an example of how compliance looks over a period of time. You can see that compliance, and specifically SOC 2, is over 12 months. In these 12 months, the auditor is gonna come and just ask populations, configurations, screenshots, do some tests, like try to connect into your instance, EC2 instance, while using this SSH, and delete the user from the machine itself. And then it's gonna make transaction tests and see if you can get some access into your machines. And this is just one type of test. So you actually need to have an ongoing audit and check the effectiveness all the time. All right, this is what you want to do, and you want to make it effectively and not to waste your own time. So if we go more in depth, and we will speak about controls. So we have 3 types of controls. We have administrative controls. It can be board meeting, it can be management meeting, it can be different stuff that actually many times related to the management. Second, we can have procedural controls, which I'm going to discuss in further what it's all about. But in very general, it's processes and procedure that should happen every quarter, every month, every week, like a stand-up meeting for the product and for the R&D team, like user access review that should happen for your different environments. And you have the technical controls. Technical controls like implementation and of configuration of multi-factor authentication, password policy, and other type of control. If we deep dive over here and focusing on the procedural controls and on the technical controls, so some of them may be vary, but let's start with the procedural control. So when we're discussing about new employees and onboarding and offboarding of employees, so in small companies, very easy. You have like your Slack, you have your email, you have your Google Drive, and that's about it. Then you have your ticketing system. It can be Jira, it can be Monday, it can be ClickUp. And this is the main system. Now it starts getting complicated because R&D, they work with AWS, and they also have some other assets that they need to use. It can be like data storage, it can be MongoDB, it can be Snowflake, it can be Redis, it can be other types of Airflow and other types of system, which you define as critical system. And you will need to manage that only specific employees that have the right privilege will actually log into the relevant system. Access request. In small companies, everyone's sitting in the same room and just asking from the friend, can you just give me access to the production? I need to debug something. Now in compliance, it can't happen. You have to have documentation for everything. Documentation can be an email. It can be a Slack channel dedicated for access requests. It can be a Jira ticket. It's really depends on your internal process. It can be maybe you have a role-based access control through Okta. It really depends on the company growth and on the company structure and the internal system they're using. Pen test is mandatory, for instance, and this is something that I guess you're hearing a lot in these conferences, so I don't want to get in depth over there. But I do want to share what I know and what I can and show you some other perspective. Regarding change management, this is exactly it. Everything that happening during the, let's say, software development life cycle, it can start with the requirement phase, design, coding, testing, and deployment into the production environment. So actually, it's relevant for the audience, for yourself, to understand your CI/CD pipeline, understand who can actually deploy, and for each step, you actually want to have some approval process. Now, the top risk over here is that someone can make changes into the production environment without approval. And you do want to reduce the risk over there that can come from fraud, from human error, or from other security risk, in which this is the type, at least for the auditor, and in sense of compliance, to reduce this risk. Risk assessment and risk mitigation can be very broad, but in general, it's managing, it can be like business risk, it can be like financial risk, operational risk, and security risk that's happening in the company. And this is a process that you understand what is the threat, what is your vulnerability that you have in your environment or in maybe in the system. I can give you an example from a company that I work with. They had a problem because they were 25 employees and also they had 25 contractors and they were operating from 7 countries. Now the problem over there was that actually all employees was managing from the payroll system, but the payroll system contained only 25 employees, was 50% of the company. Now, all the contractors actually still got access to critical systems, customer data, and it wasn't managed. What was going in the offboarding process was a mess. If an employee or a contractor was terminated, his access wasn't removed like on a timely basis, like wasn't happening in 12 hours, wasn't happening in 24 hours. And this is a huge risk that you can also fail compliance with this. About technical controls, and this is something that's more related over here. Technical controls can be varied, starting with password policy, multi-factor authentication for everything, wherever you can. Also, regarding multi-factor authentication, I saw companies that fail compliance because when I audit the access to the production environment, so actually for the console, they did that multi-factor authentication. But when I was discussing about programmatic access through the SDK, so after they put the AWS config through the terminal, there was no multi-factor authentication. It wasn't exist that they can still run commands like an administrator. Third is like SSH or RDP or direct access into the production environment. This is something that also wasn't going through multi-factor authentication. And this is just stuff I saw. Automated QA vulnerability scan, anti-malware, this is more related into the security. In small companies, I get to see CTO, and that's managing all of the security, also wearing the CISO hat as a CTO. They very occupied while managing their own internal staff and the development and design and stand on the strict deadlines. But on the other end, what I get to see is that while they were doing this, it was still a problem because they don't have time actually to deploy antivirus on all endpoints. They also don't believe in deployment of antivirus. They say there is no effect. Why do I need to do this in the first place? Devices were not managed. So some employees working with their own computers, they didn't implement bring your own device policy. If companies actually have no offices at all, so they didn't know how to work from remotely, they didn't operate it in a way that it was scalable. And that's about it. So how to build a compliance at scale. First, I wanted you to see in what system actually relevant while doing audits. Usually, wherever you have customer data is relevant. All right, so AWS, GCP, Azure, Heroku, DigitalOcean, stuff I see. Next is the SSO tool like Okta, Google Workspace, Active Directory, and etc. GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket in a sense of source code management tools, Jump Cloud, how do you manage your endpoint, and how you deploy your policy, if this is a disk encryption, if this autolock, a remote wipe, what do you do in case of your employee lost a computer or you lost your own computer? Maybe you have a code, your source code on this computer, maybe you have some customer data on this computer. So this is regarding this one. Jira, and how do you manage your change management and basically all your product feature, and other data like MongoDB, Snowflake, and etc. Some other technical controls and perspective that I wanted to discuss about is about cloud security, access points, security groups, ports, default configuration that you may see in AWS or other environment. So everything should be scanned through regular vulnerability scans. Over there, audit trails should be enabled, and not only enabled, but you also need to review the audit trail on a monthly basis, or you can implement some rules and get some alerts. So that would be the best case. Every time you can put alerts and put aside your manual review and just let system notify you every time that something is happening. It will be the best practice. Companies implementing different AWS services like GuardDuty, CloudTrail, different type of other services that very efficient in many times. Software development, secure software development lifecycle. How it's related to compliance is security awareness training. This is something that shall happen every year. Okay, so every year, all the employees in the company will have to go through security awareness training. Now, this is a basic level, maybe in startups. As you grow and you become more growth and a more robust company, and you have more employees, you have more departments, and then you want to focus your security training for each department. So if this is the R&D department, how to build the right code, how to scan your code, which libraries do you want to use? If this is for the HR or for the sales team or for the marketing team or any other company and any other team in the company. And third is about infrastructure and application, SDLC. So I did discuss about the ticketing and connecting between Jira and GitHub. This is something that's relevant in order to debugging and actually identify wherever, just to connect between the actual ticket to the pull request and other way around. And third, it's about change management and about actually approving code and code review. This is the most mandatory and the first control that you maybe want to implement in your while you're getting on into and preparing your company for compliance. And other type of stuff about compliance automation. So assets mapping, that will be maybe the first step that you will need to do. It's starting and scanning your whole environment. If it could be automated, that will be the best. If not, you will need to have a manual process. And when I'm speaking about assets, first of all, it's identifying all your SaaS application and IT vendors that you are working with. In small companies can be like 25 employees company, can be also average of 50 SaaS applications in a company. In bigger companies, it can get to 200 and 300 and even more applications, SaaS applications that the company is using. So you need to think what data is there inside, who are the administrators, what is the actual risk, How do you authenticate to this platform, if this is through SSO or this is through password? And what happens if you implement Okta, but like authentication to AWS doesn't really go sync through Okta, and this is happening directly with AWS. So this is stuff that you will need to review. User access review, I will go fast because I don't have time. So user access review, basically, this is a huge thing in compliance, especially in SOC 2. And first will be to identify all the critical system, because doing user access review properly in 200 applications can be very challenging, very demanding, and usually don't really happen. So you do want to understand how you can automate the process. I saw some automation, very basic automation, happening through Zapier, also happening through Terraform, happening through role-based access controls in Okta, and also in some companies, also in big companies, developers should not have access to the production environment, because if developers do have access, so they can actually do develop code and then log in directly into the production, into the machine, and just deploy the code they just developed without any change management process. So I saw a company, for instance, that built a bot, that the bot was connected to the Slack, and every time a developer wanted an access, so he was asking if it was a particular list. So he was sending a request, and then through Slack, and then he got a temporary access to the production environment for debugging and the internal application. And last thing I want to speak about is what can go wrong. All right, the key issues I tend to see. So user access review not happen fully. It's not documented. It's not correct. It's not on time. Code reviews not performed for all tickets. For some of the tickets, AWS access does not go through multi-factor authentication. Offboarding of employees, access requests and approval are not documented in tickets and emails, and evidence in general are not sufficient, and you don't have the functionality to see what's happening in your environment and do ongoing audits. So this is stuff that you need to think of when you prepare your company for compliance. And that's it. It was fast. Now, I would love if anyone has any question regarding this, I would love to answer. Yes.
Sounds very costly for that